What would possess Hezbollah's top leadership to remain in areas where they know that Israel has the capability of targeting them?
Well, that was going to be the second part of my two-front answer. They were sold out. There's definitely somebody who sold them out from the inside. The fact that they have never been targeted before, from 2006 until today, in their civilian area, and they had overestimated that the Israelis are not going to target civilian areas because they have managed to create this balance of terror and the power of deterrence by saying, like, we will hit Tel Aviv if you hit the southern suburbs.
We're joined now by Leila Hatoum, live from Beirut, the editor-in-chief of MENA Uncensored. Leila, I know it's been a devastating time for Lebanon, so let me just start by saying that I can't tell you how happy it makes me to know that you're safe, and I hope that you and your loved ones will continue to be safe. I'm just going to jump right into it. Hassan Nasrallah was the Secretary General of Hezbollah for 32 years. That's a long time, and he's 100% the architect that transformed Hezbollah from a ragtag, lightly armed militia into what is now widely considered to be the most militarily powerful and perhaps politically powerful non-state group in the entire world. How devastating a loss is it for Hezbollah to have their most senior commander assassinated in the midst of an open conflict with Israel?
Hello, and thank you for hosting me back. It's always a pleasure to be on your show. We have to understand it from different aspects. When you speak to people on the ground, the regular Joes who actually supported the resistance against the Israeli aggression on Lebanon and against the Israeli occupation, they are all devastated. They are sad. I mean, everybody liked him within not only Hezbollah's milieu, but even the wider spectrum, because he was a charismatic leader. He knew how to speak to the audiences. He had a sense of humor. He was mostly straightforward, and whatever he said, people wouldn't question it because he wasn't proven as a liar in terms of what he says in his speeches. Like, he always promised things that he delivered at one point in time. However, when we speak on the leadership level, I mean, within the MPs, ministers, former ministers, and basically members of Hezbollah, aside from them losing somebody they respect and the leader they look up to, he's also the person who brought victories to Hezbollah. Remember, under his tenure, the Israeli occupation withdrew from most of southern Lebanon. In 2006, Hezbollah managed to quell the Israelis from achieving any military goal on the ground, which meant a defeat to the traditional army that the Israelis were leading, versus a resistance group on the ground that was facing that mighty army in front of everybody. And so they have lost this kind of leader. That's going to leave a major gap in their hearts. But you have to understand, Hezbollah, since beginning until today, was not tied to a person. Yes, he's the longest serving Secretary General for Hezbollah, but it is not tied to a person, in the sense that if you take away a leader, there's a second tier, third tier leaders who have been in training to take part instead of that leader once the gap happens. I mean, at the end of the day, nobody lives forever. And also remember that Sayyid Hassan Nasrallah took his position right after the assassination of Hezbollah's former Secretary General, Sayyid Abbas al-Musawi, back in 1992. When he was in his car with his wife and toddler child, and Israelis assassinated him with a missile. He assumed power because he was the one in training to be the next commander of Hezbollah, the next leader of Hezbollah. So on the political level and the tactical level, it's not going to create a gap in terms of the leadership thing, because they do have people who have been trained to take that position. Most likely, Sayyid Hashim Safiyuddin, who is his maternal cousin, by the way, member of the political bureau, and he's basically one of the most aware people of what's happening on the ground in terms of fighting, as well as he looks like him. I mean, this is a plus when it comes to replacing somebody who's as charismatic and somebody who has been imprinted in people's minds for the longest time. We're talking about over 3 decades. So I do believe that there's a leadership that's going to see a smooth transition. But when it comes to people missing out on that leader, because he's very rare to see within the Arab commanders across the Arab spectrum, he's going to leave a gap.
Yeah, no, you see, this raises some questions. I mean, I'm just going to recap some stuff. You know it, I know it, just for the benefit of the viewers. 30th July, Israel assassinated Fuad Shukr, another very senior commander, in a fairly targeted strike in his place where he was in Beirut, right? Then on 18 September, we saw Israel target electronic pages across southern Lebanon, in which certainly Hezbollah operatives were killed and injured, but also countless civilians, including doctors, paramedics, rescue personnel, and children. A day later, they follow up with attacks on walkie-talkies and other electronic devices. And then we see a series of indiscriminate, extreme carpet bombing of Lebanon, in which hundreds and hundreds of civilians are dead. I don't even think we know the death toll by now. Now, Hezbollah has been in the crosshairs of Israel since its inception in 1982. They've suffered assassinations before, as you just mentioned. Why would Hassan Nasrallah and senior Hezbollah leadership still be sheltering in Tahrir, which everybody knows is a Hezbollah stronghold? I mean, does this not point to perhaps an underestimation of Israel's capabilities?
I do believe that this is a two-pronged answer. It's going to be a two-pronged answer. The first part is that I do believe there was an underestimation of what the Israelis are capable of, despite the fact that we saw what they were capable of in Gaza. The thing is, the buildings that were hit by the Israeli occupation, the air raid that happened yesterday, with the tens of tons of bombs that were thrown in less than a minute in one place, they knew that he was there. So the whole idea is that him being there, it is a political, first of all, you have to understand, it's a civilian area. This is not Hezbollah's central command in terms of military power. This is Hezbollah's center for political bureau members. This is a center for basically strategic studies. I mean, like, there were lots of civilians in that area. Now, we had until today about 11 to 14 martyrs from this attack. We have over 90 people injured. That tells you one thing. Usually in normal days, you would have hundreds of people living in that area, thousands of people. So you have only 14 or 11 martyrs and 91 injured ones. It means Hezbollah had told everybody to leave beforehand. It was a Friday. Usually on Fridays, people leave from midday up, right? So the civilian area was cleared during that day. And I think that's when Hezbollah decided that they were going to have their meeting, when nobody is monitoring them. That was they underestimated that the Israelis are going to hit civilian areas. Doesn't matter if Hezbollah's HQ is in a civilian area or not, they're going to target him. Because there was an escalation in this war that the Israelis were looking for. And the assassination of Sayyid Hassan Nasrallah could lead to a regional war, because he is a leader of that caliber. He is the de facto leader of the axis of resistance. Let's not kid ourselves.
Sorry, Leila, I'm just going to interrupt you there. I mean, we know, all of us who have been watching the devastation in Gaza, is that Israel does not shy away from targeting civilian areas. I mean, in Gaza, they delight in murdering civilians. So obviously, it's not going to be any different in Lebanon. What I'm trying to get a sense of is why Hassan Nasrallah, and I'm assuming a lot of other senior Hezbollah leadership was there present with him. There's different reports coming out that perhaps some IRGC officials were present with him. We don't have any confirmation of that right now.
We do have. We actually
do have confirmation of that.
Yeah.
But so that's a very serious high level meeting. Nobody knows better than Hezbollah or the people of Lebanon the kind of tactics that Israel uses and the kind of weaponry and technology they have access to. I mean, especially in the aftermath of the pager and walkie-talkie attacks. I'm just trying to get a sense of what would possess Hezbollah's top leadership to remain in areas where they know that Israel has the capability of targeting them, regardless of whether there are civilians there or not. I mean, Israel would happily murder all of Beirut just to get to, 2 people. So, I mean, doesn't this point to, and I'm a little shocked by it, honestly speaking. I mean, doesn't it point to some serious lapses in operational security by Hezbollah?
Well, that was going to be the second part of my two-front answer. They were sold out. There's definitely somebody who sold them out from the inside. The fact that they have never been targeted before, from 2006 until today, in their civilian area, and they had overestimated that the Israelis are not going to target civilian areas because they have managed to create this balance of terror and the power of deterrence by saying, like, we will hit Tel Aviv if you hit the southern suburbs. They overestimated their capabilities, and they underestimated what the Israelis are capable of. The Israelis are currently like a wounded animal. They're cornered. They're losing the trust of their population inside the Israeli entity, and they needed some kind of a surgical tactical hit that would eliminate the most senior people within Hezbollah, so they can have or tell their people that we have eliminated the danger to a certain extent, and they will appear macho. This is what Netanyahu managed to do while he was in New York, and he returned to the Israeli entity earlier today. So if you look at it, I do believe that, as I said, Hezbollah did not expect the Israelis to hit a civilian area. When it comes to southern suburbs, it will be like surgical tactical hits against second-tier leadership. And this is what the Israelis have been showing them for the past 3 weeks. And suddenly this happens. The meeting that was happening in that area, it's because it was empty on a Friday evening, because people work only for half days on Fridays, and they had asked everybody to clear the area because there might be some targeting by the Israelis, because we saw it in the past happening against the southern suburbs over the past week and a half. So they went there and they were confident. Somebody sold them out from the inside. This meeting is not shared among the third-tier people or second-tier people at one point. So it's somebody from the inside who knew of the meeting, or one of the guards, we don't know, or somebody who had been monitoring the area for the longest time. And remember, this area is widely breached. Anybody can move anywhere in Lebanon. You don't even have to hold the camera. You just sit there. Day after day, you just rent a shop and just monitor and sell things, and nobody will even judge you or doubt you. And we have lots of Syrians who came from Syria during the fighting in Syria, and most of them are anti-Assad, but they stayed in the southern suburbs. And those people at one point were anti-Hezbollah. So you have lots of breaches on multiple levels. Intel-wise, you have 57 NATO states and their allies also monitoring the situation from satellites, from people on the ground, from the embassies, and giving intel to the Israelis. So they underestimated what the Israelis are capable of, and they overestimated that they will be protected within a civilian area. That's a mistake. At the end of the day, we have to be realistic. We have to say that.
Yeah, because that's shocking to me. I mean, we know that Israel is okay with killing civilians. I mean, Hezbollah is obviously well aware of the kind of international support that Israel has, and the intelligence networks that they're capable of. And I mean, who would know better about the polity and the makeup of Lebanon than Hezbollah? And you mentioned Gaza. So there's an interesting contrast here, Leila, that it's been almost a year now, right, that they have devastated Gaza. Gaza is a tiny little strip of land, completely surveilled, completely dominated by Israel. And yet, while they have killed hundreds of thousands of Palestinians, Israel's been notably unsuccessful in managing to eliminate Hamas's leadership. I mean, Yahya Sinwar is alive and presumably active. Abu Ubaidah is alive and presumably active. What do you think that Hamas did right in terms of counterintelligence that perhaps Hezbollah has been unable to do?
Well, they did 3 things right. First of all, they don't share the information outside the tiniest circle that they have. And tiny circles like people that are directly linked to Sinwar. The other thing is that they don't have political bureau members meeting in a certain place for the longest time, and they're doing it during wartime. Nobody knew about their tunnels, where they extend to, whether they are inside Gaza or they have left outside. And the most important part is that they live within an entity that they understand its mentality. I mean, we have fought against the Israelis for the longest time. Yes, we do have people who actually speak Hebrew. They've been following on the situation. They don't understand the military tactics of the Israelis, but they haven't lived with them. Sinwar was in the Israeli concentration camps. I call them torture facilities. These are not prisons. These are torture facilities manned by the occupation. And he lived there for the longest time. He understood them. He understood their mentality and what they're capable of. So him sharing information, even with the closest circle, would be on a need-to-know basis. Whereas in Hezbollah, I mean, at any point, any pro-Hezbollah, what you call a reporter, can call some of the members that they have known for the past, let's say 10 years, 20 years. They would give them information, and they use electronic devices. Hamas, until today, they don't use electronic devices. They don't use the regular phones and smartphones that you do. Hezbollah had to relinquish them recently after the pagers attack. So with the pagers, you can pinpoint where they're moving. For the longest time, you create that network, and then you know where they frequent, which places they frequent, and then you can target them. And don't forget, with that technology and with the intel that the Americans and the British have been giving them, including using the C-130 planes that are responsible for the electronic warfare above ground and underground, they have enough data that they can actually pinpoint where everybody was moving at one point in time. Especially when they monitor the head of the parliamentary bloc, for example, when he speaks with the first tier leadership, and then one number leads to another, and another number leads to another. So this is how they pinpoint them, and they wait. And they monitor the situation, and then they do the hit. And Netanyahu actually agreed on that hit before he traveled to the United Nations, right after the Galilot attack, the base that's basically 1.5 kilometers away from Tel Aviv, the Mossad headquarters. Remember that Netanyahu had he had stopped or froze his travel plans, met with his military leaders, and then he traveled the next day.
Okay, now I want to talk a little bit about what it's like, what the feeling is in Lebanon right now. Now, we know obviously that Lebanon went through a prolonged civil war. We've seen divisions between Sunni and Shia. We've seen divisions between Muslim and Christian. In this latest attacks on Beirut, I mean, thus far, what we've seen is that we've seen Sunni clerics in the north of Lebanon welcoming refugees from the south. We've even seen certain Christian groups that are perhaps politically opposed to Hezbollah still offer to help and reach out. But if the Israeli attacks on Lebanon, on Beirut, and various other places, on Hezbollah continue, how great is the risk that these sectarian differences will once again come to play? Because that's certainly something that Israel is working towards.
Well, the Israelis have been trying for the past 11 months to create that sedition through social media. And remember, social media is very, very what you call influential in the Arab world and in Lebanon as well. Everybody's pastime at one point. And sometimes you hear strong voices on social media and you think that they represent everyone, but that's not true. The representation on the ground is very minimal. After this attack that happened, the pagers attack on Lebanon, we were very surprised to see even the ones who are against Hezbollah when it comes to politics join hands, go and donate blood. Some people basically saying we're willing to donate organs for those who actually lost an organ or something. And it showed solidarity among the Lebanese. This is what the Israelis fail to understand. No matter how much you try to create sedition, it's only the very few who are right-wing in Lebanon who used to work with the Israelis during the Israeli occupation in Lebanon, or their parents used to work with the Israeli occupation, that have a problem with the Muslim-Christian divide that we saw during the civil war at one point. Those are the ones who might create problems on the ground, but they are not a majority. We saw Christians directly coming together to help the displaced people who are coming down from the south of Lebanon. We've seen Druze people open their homes in the mountains for the Muslims and the Christians who were displaced from South Lebanon. Remember, South Lebanon is not only Shia. Despite the fact that everybody or almost everyone supports the resistance in South Lebanon because they don't like the Israeli occupation, but not all of them are Shia. You have Sunnis who are basically from the town of Shib'a, who has been bombarded and hammered by the Israelis for the past 2 days. You have Christians in Iblis Sa'i and other areas in South Lebanon, including blue line villages that have been hit. And one of them was a person who at one point was about to become the army leader before he was assassinated back in 2008. So the whole idea is that when you see people coming together from all walks of life and all faiths joining hands to help out, I have seen people in Babda, my hometown, Christians cooking every day meals for Muslims and Christians who were displaced from South Lebanon. So this had foiled the Israeli attempt to create the sedition. Civil war, we might not see it at all, but we can see some conflicts happening in an area here or there, individual fights, but definitely not a civil war. The areas where you have majority right-wing living in them are very few, and they don't even allow people to go and stay in their areas. But we did see some of them actually welcoming displaced people. That gives me hope that this country continues to support its own citizens because they know they only have each other at the end of the day.
Where's the Lebanese army at this point in time? I mean, after all, Lebanese territory is being bombed, Lebanese civilians are being killed. I'm not talking about capability, of that army, but has anything come from, any kind of statement from the armed forces or from the Lebanese leadership? Because their own territory is being bombed, Hezbollah notwithstanding.
I know that the army is very active when it comes to the intel work on the ground. Remember, but despite all the atrocities that has happened to Lebanon over the past 11 months, and the fact that we are heavily breached by international intel organizations, the army is still working on the ground, and we haven't seen the kind of security breaches that jeopardizes people, aside from the Israeli airstrikes. Israel has the advantage when it comes to air force and intel. So that's different. You cannot stop it no matter what. And the Lebanese army is underfunded, it's under-equipped, and it's banned from having strategic weapons by a decision from the international community because they don't want to have somebody, basically an army with strong strategic weapons along the borders with occupied Palestine where the Israeli entity is. They don't want anybody to fight the Israelis. So the Lebanese army works on securing the back of the resistance, but when push comes to shove and fighting starts, the expanded war starts, let's say, for example, an Israeli invasion, you'll see the army on the front lines. The army is currently on the front lines. They have moved battalions over there in preparation for anything. They're also manning the internal situation along with the internal security forces. And I want to remind everybody to go back to 2006. That's when you saw the Lebanese army fighting side by side with the resistance and quelling Israeli attacks and landing not only on the beach, but also via paratroopers. And they lost martyrs. So at the end of the day, our defense strategy, which has been adopted by Lebanon, since 1996 until today, by every government that passed from 1996 until today, that triangle that says army, resistance, and people is our defense strategy. It has held its ground since then until now. So I do expect if we see another situation like the 2006 Israeli aggression on Lebanon, I do believe that the army and the resistance will be fighting side by side, and the people will take part in it like we saw in 2006.
How well prepared do you think Hezbollah is for a possible ground invasion? Because the kind of strikes that we've seen, and obviously, I think only the most delusional would think that Hezbollah would back off now, given that its entire origin story is a reaction to the Israeli invasion of Lebanon. Surely Israel has learned lessons from 2006. I'm sure Hezbollah has as well. Obviously, at this point in time, we don't know whether the ground invasion will take place. We don't know what the nature of it will be. But how do you see that playing out?
Well, I'm going to call it the bloody tango, because everybody will lose something on the ground. War, at the end of the day, it's war and everybody loses, right? But Hezbollah had taken points and learned from 2006, and the Israelis have learned from 2006. The difference is that Hezbollah has few entities supporting it, only two countries, that's Iran and Syria, and the rest are entities like basically Nasrullah in Yemen, the Iraqi armed forces, and the armed resistance in Gaza. So if you look at it, they do have enough intel on the ground to help them support their actions, and they're basically fighting. The Israelis have all of NATO behind it. So if the Israelis decide to go into what you call a ground invasion, and today we heard them say like, if we are going to do a ground invasion, it's going to be short and swift. There's nothing called short and swift if you go into Lebanon. They tried to do short and swift in Gaza and it didn't work out. So when it comes to Lebanon, you have people that have basically that live in the terrains in the southern Lebanon and also in the Bekaa area, they know their terrain very well. The Israelis coming there, be it via Merkavas or anything else, they will sustain heavy losses. The difference is that we can take in the hits and the numbers of martyrs. Do the Israelis have the courage and capacity to take in hundreds, if not thousands, of their soldiers being killed? That's a question mark. Remember, in 2006, when we did not have enough preparation for a major war, the Israelis lost heavily. I'm not talking only about human losses, but also financially. They lost the Merkavas, almost 41 Merkavas were lost in Wadi Hijr and Wadi Sluki area. And with that, they lost contracts worth billions of dollars to sell these Merkava tanks. So the Israelis were banking on having a swift war where they appear victorious and sell these contracts. Today, what we're seeing on the ground, the Israelis lack intel when it comes to radar systems and what you call the Iron Dome. Contracts for the Iron Dome have gone down. Nobody's buying them anymore. Drones are being hit. Hermes 900 and Hermes 450 they've lost contract. Basically, the Rafael military industries, among other military industries that supply such tactical basically equipment for the Israeli military machine. And at the same time, they will be losing people. The whole population inside Israel is currently divided politically. Netanyahu, despite the fact that he will appear victorious in front of his people, there is still a strong, what you call opposition leadership that wants to take power instead of Netanyahu. So they will continue to rally people on the ground. Any mistake that happens in Lebanon, they will use it against him. And any mistake
that is obviously why Netanyahu wants to prolong the war, because he knows that it is linked to him staying in power and possibly also out of jail. Leila Hatoum, thank you so much once again. Prayers for your continued safety and hope to speak to you again soon. Thank you so much.
Thank you for your time.